that purpose increases productivity 40%, okay? That around the same numbers on customer relationships. People who have a purpose, their customers have a satisfaction rate like 40% higher. It's all quantifiable. It's all study after study after study of the best labs in the world measuring tangible, actual benefits of what we call psychological capacity at organizations.
Welcome to Sustainability Transformations podcast, where we explore bold ideas to drive positive change for people, the community, and business. And today we have Dr. Alfredo, who is insightful, purpose-driven, transformational, science-backed, and inspirational. He's a global keynote speaker, an expert in peak performance and positive psychology. He helps leaders and teams break through resistance to drive sustainable performance, innovation, and energy. Thank you, Alfredo. Your equation positivity plus purpose equals peak performance is powerful. Where did this framework begin for you and how has it evolved?
It's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you for the opportunity, and I hope I bring some wisdom and I help people to achieve peak performance. Like most good stories, they come from life, from personal story. In my case, wow, I went through something. I never expected, to be an expert on positive psychology or peak performance. It happened to me out of my life turning upside down. In 2013, I was arrested for impersonating a police officer. At that point in life, I was a rabbi of a very prestigious community, one of the largest here in the United States. I was on top of the world. I had an office at facing Central Park in Manhattan. Coming from Argentina, middle class, I made it big. I was going in the morning, sitting, putting my feet on my desk, coffee, and watching through the window in Central Park. And coming from middle class in Argentina, I made it big as it could get. And never thought about peak performance and positivity. I was there. I was living it. Okay, it was natural to me until that morning of 2013, June 19th, I was arrested for impersonating a police officer. What happened is that a few months before, a congregant of mine, who was a retired detective, gave me one of those friends and family shields. I am not sure if you have them those in the UK, but here, policemen can give to their family a kind of small version of their shield, okay, which I think is crazy. Okay, it shouldn't be legal. But he gave me one and he said, Alfredo, with this, you are going to have no problems. And I was manic. I was taking the wrong medication and antidepressive. And they gave me the shield. And basically, I adopted the personality of a policeman. And I began basically directing traffic at the highways of New York and telling people how to drive. Until I showed my badge to a young lady. And 3 minutes later, I have 3 patrol cars behind me, and I was arrested. It happens to be Enoch. I later on learned that the lady was the fiancée of one of the cops, or one of the policemen in town, of all people, And I was arrested. I was accused of impersonating a police officer. I was fired from my job. My friends basically gave their back to me. They stopped talking to me. They stopped emailing to me. I was diagnosed hospitalized and diagnosed bipolar. And because I was a prestigious rabbi, the written press made a circus out of me and they called me the road rage rabbi. And I went viral. I was on front page of newspapers in Japan and Ireland. Again, I didn't touch anybody. I wasn't violent, but it was a sensation. The rabbi who impersonates a police officer. And I went into the deepest depression. For 8 months, I was on a couch, on fetal position, until one morning, I don't know how, I felt a force moving me to go up to my office, go up the stairs to my office, and I went, and on top of my desk, I found something that I do not know yet how it got there. I found a yellow file. And I opened it, and I saw the results of a test on positive psychology I had taken a few months earlier, and I looked at my top 5 strengths: creativity, love of learning, curiosity, perseverance, and bravery. And something turned on inside of me. And I went back to school. And with depression, with the court cases I went through, social work school and did fantastic. Became a social worker and then became an expert on positive psychology. And I made a promise to me, to myself, that I would help people to find their top 5 strengths, to have, to go to fulfill their dreams. I experience how they can transform your life. And what is crazy is that we know from research that 2/3, 70% of people do not know their top strengths. 70% of people. There is an epidemic of strength blindness. I am on a quest to help people find, uncover, unlock their strengths.
That's a very moving story by turning around from the adversity, the challenge, as you've vividly explained. Why is clarifying purpose so essential for leaders and teams right now?
Because purpose, the definition of purpose, the one I follow, is the best of yourself for the benefit of others. Okay, that's what purpose is. Giving the best of yourself for the benefit of others. And that's why I like a principle that says purpose first. Sometimes when people talk about purpose, they locate purpose at the end. The purpose of something is to go on that direction, the objective. And people are confusing objective and purpose, are not the same. Purpose first. Purpose is what motivates you to get to the objective. And when the purpose is to give the best of yourself for the benefit of others, you will get to the objective because it's the best of what you have, the best of who you are. And once you have your purpose, you're going to get to the objective. The result of purpose is fulfillment, not success. And that's another confusion, confusing success and fulfillment. Success is usually ephemeral, it's external, it's getting something. Fulfillment is receiving something out of giving your best for the service of others. And fulfillment usually comes in 3 kinds. First is gratitude. Gratitude is when somebody comes back to you and says, for what you done for me, I achieved what I couldn't without your help. That's the greatest kind of fulfillment. The second kind is growth. When you see somebody else growing and they don't come back to you and say, thank you, but you witness the effect of your actions. And the third one is inner growth, how you grow by fulfilling your purpose. Interestingly, the third one is only 10% of fulfillment. And we usually think that the inner satisfaction is 90%. But we all know that the people we love more in life, and at the end of life, when I used to be a rabbi, I asked people, who was the person who had the greatest influence? Usually a teacher, a parent, a coach. Okay, were the ones who at some point touched your life and made you who you are. And from the point of view of purpose, that's the greatest gift you can give to somebody and the greatest fulfillment you get in return. Then good leaders, who is a leader? A leader is the one that from his or her position give the best of themselves for the benefit of others and get in return to witness how the others achieve their great potential. And if they do that, by the way, the company will grow. People are going to be at their best. They will get loyalty. They will get commitment. All those things will come. But out of this equation of positivity, purpose, and peak performance.
I spoke to a leader. The leader asked me, what does the leader of sustainability looks like? You've just given me.
Thank you.
Yeah. You've just given me how to attempt to answer. What have you observed when purpose is missing in an organization?
Clearly, all the things we know, burnt out, lack of commitment, lack of loyalty, lack of motivation, okay? You don't have a purpose, then basically the best of yourself is not being manifested, okay? And we think that purpose is going to be generating by having some kind of a quarterly report or performance assessment that is going to trace goals, okay? And now you have to produce a certain amount, which are clearly necessary for a company. You have to have objective, external validation. But that's not going to happen if we don't have first the opportunity for people to give the best they have and they are for the common good. And something I tell companies, and I see a lot, is that we are in a culture of fixing instead of a culture of nourishing.
Culture of fixing.
Instead of culture of nourishing. Some people ask me, Alfredo, you could say all that you want to say in one phrase. Okay, I have an answer. Moving from a culture of fixing to a culture of nourishing. Since childhood, our parents loved us, but they try to fix us. Okay, at school, they always look at what you're not doing well and where you need to improve. Okay, at jobs, like I said, the performance and the performance report, the manager, what do you need to improve? And what we know from positive psychology, that the biggest revenue comes from doing better what you do good than rather fixing what you're not good at. Then we are focusing on the wrong things. The best is to maximize what functions and not to fix what doesn't function, unless it's something absolutely necessary, by the way. But in general, okay, the effort is on maximizing the strength that people already have and not to zoom in on how to elevate the weaknesses that people have. That will not work, will burn people out, will not get people to top performance, to peak performance. And purpose is part of that. Purpose is part of the equation in which people give the best of who they are. And by doing that, they maximize their potential.
What you mentioned resonates. The analogy where sometimes I find some leaders are trying to teach a fish how to fly or a bird how to swim.
That's true.
It's so important to focus on the strengths, not ignoring the weaknesses, but if you disproportionately focusing so much on the weaknesses, and in other instances, I also find where you have graduates where in university or in education, you were getting 85%, 90%. Certain work settings, maybe focusing on the 10% that wasn't got right instead of focusing on the 90% which was right. Some leaders or teams
Right.
really get so bogged down into the 10% which was not enough.
Especially males. Males were trained to be fixers. You had to fix the air conditioner. You had to fix the whatever, the window. You had to fix, males were trained that if we don't fix things, we have lost our masculinity. The great role model of the male is somebody who fixed something. It's ingrained to us, and we need to get out of that paradigm. And we know that the world of the emotions, the world of strengths, something that is happened is a big revolution today in science that most businesses are not aware. Beginning in 1998, with the birth of positive psychology, and positive psychology is the science of flourishing and optimal optimum well-being and optimum functioning. It is science that studies hope, optimism, resilience, motivation. We know today, and we didn't know this 30 years ago, that we have measured, we have studies, journals, lab experiments, and we can measure an increase, tangible increase in productivity and efficiency when optimism, hope, motivation, resilience are brought into companies. Then, like I say to CEOs, it's not only good to be good at the company for good's sake because good is good, but also because good is good for business. Today, we can prove scientifically that being good is good for business. Quantifiable. We have the data. Then you don't want to be good because they used to call it soft skills, emotional skills or the soft skills. No, we know today there are hard skills that hope, well-being, optimism are on the DNA of the bottom line of corporations. And if you go into the AI technology era, thinking that you are going to be able to replace people with technology and to replace the emotional with technology, then what you're doing, you're cracking the foundations of the bottom line, not just the emotional, but what we know today is productivity and efficiency. And that's what they help companies with, by the way, to maintain their human advantage as they go into transitions, technological transition. Okay, they had to go hand on hand. They had to go together. It's not one or the other. we are tipping too much into replacing the human with the technological without understanding what are the effects of a transition which is not managed well.
So you mentioned about the positivity. How does the positivity create cultures of trust, accountability, and innovation?
Look, when you talk with people about the positivity of what they do well, you get their trust. You get their trust. We are teammates. Okay. The manager, the leader is there to make people better. First of all, we need to get out of the power play of control. And I think that companies were designed a lot on the control mechanisms in which reviews and performance give to the manager a sense that they're in control. Okay. And it's not about control, it's about maximizing somebody else's capabilities. Okay. And that will not make you lose control. You're not relinquishing power. Okay. You want to use the paradigm of power, you become more powerful by being a mentor, not by being a controller. But what happened is that the model of companies, if you look at the origin, was borrowed from the medical field.
Okay. That's
Okay,
interesting.
the origins of organizational consulting and psychology come from the medical field, then of curing illnesses. And that's why we have diagnostics and all that language applied to it. Then we borrow the first models for the medical field, and it's all about preventing illness or curing disease in companies, okay, instead of maximizing health, okay, well-being, okay. Many companies are beginning to understand this. By the way, this is going on a transformation, but not enough of what it should. Okay, most of them still working on the old paradigm of preventing sickness and curing sickness. And what you do when you do that, by the way, you need to find sickness to feel that you're doing your job. Okay, okay, you're an illness seeker. Otherwise, are you not the manager? Are you not managing well? You're victim of the paradigm that you're trying to get out of. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Then you put, I tell you a story. I was in Argentina. I may have been like 13, 14 years old. And I was with my father at a supermarket, no Walmarts at that point, but something like it. And I wanted a bicycle. Bicycle 40 years ago in Argentina was you bought a car and then a bicycle. It was a big expensive thing. Today you go and buy a bicycle for a couple of $100. At that point was the gift of a lifetime. Then my father wasn't going to buy that bicycle. No way. Then he says to me, Alfredo, go around the store and count how many pregnant women are here. And I said, this is crazy. Great deal. I go around on the pregnant women and I get a bicycle. The question is how many pregnant women if
Okay.
you know how many?
5.
One on each aisle. It's like all the pregnant women of Buenos Aires came for a convention at the supermarket. Why did I see so many pregnant women? Because I was looking for them.
Right.
And we see what we are predetermined to find.
Right.
By the way, my father was a genius because at that point I forgot all about the bicycle. I was so shocked with pregnant women that, he was fantastic. He didn't know any positive psychology, but I think intuitively he knew more than it. Okay. And then it's an issue what we are looking for. If we are looking for illness, we're going to find illness. If we are looking for advantages based on strength, we're going to find those. Clearly, so we need healthy corporations and businesses, and there are things to fix. It's not an all or nothing, but what is your tendency? What are you seeking for? What makes you feel fulfilled? Sickness or strength? That's a decision that each corporation, each leader, each manager has to make. It's going to give you a completely different kind of leadership and management and company and culture and teams. Teams who achieve through fear and then they burn out, or to achieve through positivity and performance and purpose, and they feel energized and motivated.
You mentioned that there is a body of evidence that when companies do good, can you share some of those incredible insights? Because I'm very curious to know about some of the insights
Yeah,
around.
they
Yeah.
give you some, for example, we know that if somebody knows the strengths, just knowing their strengths, the top 5 strengths of positive psychology, there are 24 strengths in positive psychology: humor, love of learning, leadership, curiosity, 24. If somebody knows their top 5 just by knowing them, they have the capacity to flourish 9 times more. If they apply it, 18 times more, which means that people who are blind to their strength are working from 9 to 18 times below what they could. And by the way, I will tell now your audience how to get the strengths, because I will not leave. You go now, anybody who's listening, take your phone and text the word positive to 3377. Your phone and text positive. Do it yourself. Positive to 33777, and you are going to get. They're going to send you 24 strands of positive psychology and a couple of questions on how to determine which one you're top 5. And everybody who's listening will have a chance to maximize their potential 9 times and 18 times. Okay? Couldn't be easier. Okay? I used to give my last name, Borodowski or something like that. I don't know even how to spell my own last name. Imagine when I was asking people to do it. Now it's so easy. Positive 33777. Then now I could spend the rest of the podcast just giving you statistics. That purpose increases productivity 40%. Okay. That around the same numbers on customer relationships. People who have a purpose, their customers have a satisfaction rate like 40% higher. It's all quantifiable. It's all study after study after study of the best labs in the world measuring tangible, actual benefits of what we call psychological capacity at organizations. All quantifiable. Is not anymore just about being nice, which is good. The well-being of your employees is going to have a direct impact in your bottom line. Plain and simple. Plain and simple. All scientifically demonstrated.
Well-being is more obvious because if people don't have a good well-being, very interesting with the purpose, because there is a body of knowledge within the sustainability space where employees who are not engaged in companies, employees who are leaving companies, employees who want to join companies, there is a significant 50% or so.
Yeah, the difference.
Right.
The difference is that the movement of well-being in great companies was like having daycare for your kids.
Right.
Having a massage parlor at work, having free coffee and cookies, having dry cleaners, which is great, by the way. All that is great.
Yeah.
Okay, but now we know something else. Well-being is working on hope, optimism, resilience, and confidence. Those are the 4 things.
Hope, well-being.
Well-being, hope, optimism, resilience, and confidence. Those are the 4 pillars. Okay. Then you can give all the dry cleaner and you can give all the daycare. Okay, but you don't have exercises on hope and workshop on hopes and use a language of hope, and you don't have a real program on optimism and how to establish optimism. It would be way beyond a podcast to tell you how to do it. But there are programs, there are strategies on increasing optimism, hope, resilience, and confidence. Okay, and the leader has to know how to talk the hopeful language, the resilient language, the confident language, and the optimistic language. Then it's not anymore about cookies and coffee. Now, because of the revolution of the last 30 years on positive psychology, you have the language, the programs, the methodology, the strategies to work directly to the core of the strengths. First of all, everybody who works at the company today should go through an exercise to know the strengths. And management should be based on what the job demands, based on the strengths. And teams should be put together based on a variety of strengths. Okay, we have all the data, okay, and teams that have variety of strengths are much better than teams that have no variety of strengths. But if you don't know what the strengths of the people are and they don't know their own strengths, then you are you are putting teams blindly. Today we have all the data, all the knowledge to be effective in those domains.
That's good. So how do leaders deliver the hope, the optimism, which is real, but it's not just, so for example, the climate change, how do companies within sustainability and biodiversity taking care of the environment?
I sustain people. I'm in the business of sustaining people. Okay, and I think that we do not sustain people, nothing else is sustained. Okay, then my sustainability plan is to sustain people. If you want to go to optimism, we know, just to take one thing, optimism is the capacity to tell yourself that you can.
Tell oneself, not somebody, not telling somebody, tell your own self.
When somebody else has to help you, tell yourself that you can. A good manager, a good leader. Okay, then two people can confront the same challenge, and one will tell him or herself, I can't, and the other will say, I can. That it was based on what is called in positive psychology, the explanatory style. Every person has an explanatory style by which they tell themselves the story of the events that happen in their life. We are storytellers and we write the biggest story in our head. Companies also write their own stories about what they can and what they can't. And usually that story is transmitted by the leader. For example, when something wrong happens, optimistic leaders reduce what happened wrong in time and space. This happened to us because this quarter and because some external thing that affected our normal functioning. Okay? Let's say, oil was expensive this month. Non-optimistic leaders talk always about never and always. They take the crisis and talk about this always happens to us. We will never get, and they expand it on time and place. Then there is a language to optimism. And what good leaders and managers do, instead of blaming, they create an explanatory style that contains crisis. Okay? Then optimism has to do a lot with the language we use and how we explain what happened to us, which explanatory style, okay? And that's something that I love to work with companies to develop a language that created optimistic company. More optimism, more production, more efficiency. It's not only a feeling, an emotion, it's directly connected to efficiency.
Right. So even though it's a feeling, it's still connected to efficiency.
Absolutely. Measure today. We can measure it.
So you say motivation isn't about missing desire, but misdirected energy. Can you explain how leaders can redirect or align that effectively?
Yeah, today, we don't, today, many of us who are in the positive psychology, we don't talk anymore about motivation. We talk about commitment. There is a shift in language. Motivation is a little bit, ephemeral. It's something that you feel and goes. I feel motivated today. I don't feel motivated tomorrow. Conviction is a deeper kind of feeling, more resilient and reliable. And commitment has to do with the idea that what I am doing is worth it. There is worth to what I am doing. And once you transmit to the people working in the company what they do is worth, you create commitment. Is the idea all the time is about making the revenue of the quarter, and the issue of why you are doing what you are doing is important. You are reducing commitment, loyalty, you have turns over, okay, then we need to go back to commitment. Commitment is based on the sacrifice I make is worthwhile. The hours I put are worthwhile. The getting late home and working extra hours are worthwhile. The pressure I am feeling is worthwhile. Okay, then you have to have the equation of sacrifice and worthiness. And when you have that, you have commitment much deeper. And sometimes companies feel we don't have to explain anything to anybody or motivate anybody. After all, they have to be grateful they have a job and we are paying them. And what we don't understand is that besides not being nice, we are hurting the bottom line and we are making people to be less committed, less effective, and less loyal.
Yeah.
Self-injuring is unnecessary and wrong and not wise.
There is a body of evidence, whether is employees themselves reporting or further research, which shows that there is a lot of disengaged employees, disengaged teams. Is it worth it? And I think from my own experience, I remember many instances where I've asked myself, is this worth it?
Let me give you an example. I was working last year with a company, okay? And before I work with the company, I do research. One of the things I do, I read the website very carefully. This company, at the end of the website, very interesting, very, very bottom, they have, I remember, was at the 10 core values of the company.
10, that's a lot.
And I was so happy because there are 24 strengths of positive psychology, and many of those 10 core values overlap with positive psychology. Then I met with the CEO. Not even the CEO was aware of the values. They were put together, who knows, 50 years ago when they created the company, nobody ever taught them. Nobody talked about them. I began talking with managers. Nobody knew all the values. I went, they asked me to do a workshop on motivation. You know what they did? I taught them their own values, motivation or commitment. I taught them their own values. They felt through the years that that's not important for efficiency, it's not important for bottom line, it's not important for productivity. It was nice to have them. Okay, somebody thought about them, that's good. They never pay attention to why they were doing what they were doing. And it was there all in front of their eyes. I don't have to create values. I had to show them the values they forgot about. And I imagine that every company had those values, that at some point the founders or somebody thought about them and they were just filed. They were filed on the routine and the craziness of the day to day. And sometimes you have to stop the machine to look what the machine is about. Because you don't know what the machine is about, then you're not going to have people who are loyal and committed because there is no worthiness of what they are doing. They're doing it to get a paycheck, to have security, go through inertia, to climb the ladder, feel power. All those are a good recipe for burnout and emptiness.
So, what are the common signs of resistance in teams, and how can leaders move from control to influence?
That's very easy. Look, it's easier than what you think. Once I work with a team and we do a value qualification and everybody get the strengths, we have a workshop of 2 hours in which we have like a strength market in which everybody get to discover their strengths and share the strength with others. And we have exercises and games on strengths sharing. And then I usually bring a couple of cases and situations they're dealing with, actual challenges, and they apply their strengths. A new dynamic, a new language, a new collaboration emerges in 2 hours because this is about ignorance. And sometimes, you're willing to open your eyes and learn your strengths. Ignorance could be dissipated very fast, very fast. And I've seen in 2 hour transformations. Clearly, you have to have a report and a plan of follow up, of maintenance. But a lot can be done in a very short time because this has to do with the unknown that becomes evident through, I give them diagnostic instruments like the Myers-Briggs, which is very well known. I give them the VIA, Values in Action for Positive Psychology. I gave them a new instrument called the Purpose Factor that give people the personal purpose and the purpose of the company. We put a package together of Myers-Briggs, which is styles, VIA, Values in Action of positivity, and purpose factor of purpose. We put that all together. A new language emerges, a new energy. In 2 hours, you begin seeing the transformation.
Wow. So, is that a blend of clinical therapy, executive coaching, and positive psychology into one
Yes,
transformation model?
yes. This is 30 years of work, of me working with different programs and different instruments and different insights to be able to blend them, in which each instrument is proven to be great, but the combination in the way I have put them together maximizes them, potentializes them to a new high level.
So, we live in a world of uncertainty, but I suppose or I propose that clarity is very important, even in the mix of this uncertainty. So, what tools or assessments do you find more effective for helping leaders gain clarity in the midst of uncertainty?
Your strengths are your strengths. Now, when you know your 5 top strengths, those don't change. Reality changes, uncertainty comes, but you're solid on your in your top 5 strengths. Okay, this is like your toolkit. Okay, reality will always shift, but your strengths remain solid in you, and you develop and exercises them. They grow with you. Okay, then I always begin with what are your top 5 strengths? Okay, that's basically okay. And again, 70% of people do not know them and they already have them. And then in some way they're using them, but because they're not conscious, they don't use them to the full potential.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. So you have a lot of companies when onboarding, they will have some psychometric tests. But I'm curious to know how to embed all these principles that you've talked about into onboarding of employees so that you have employees which have the right values that suit the company's or purpose, or sharing those values with them. Not only what the values that they are bringing, but also we've talked about the leadership development. But I'm curious to explore the onboarding, but also the everyday behavior, because a lot of companies training tends to be too much content as knowledge. How can they embed these principles to onboarding?
Some companies bring me for the process of hiring, okay? Then they need a profile of a person who supplements, who complements the existing team. Okay, because when I do a diagnosis, I tell you the blind spots. I tell you what you're weak at. You need this kind of personality. You need a person with this kind of strengths to make a whole team where all the variety of points of view and skills are present. And I do some of that work in the hiring process, in which, again, they ask about skills all the time, but they don't ask a person what make you feel well at work. What make you feel well at work? That's a crucial question. Because if a person is not going to feel well at work, he's not going to be a productive, efficient, loyal person. What make you feel good at work? I had that question. I get so much information about it. This is going to be a place that's going to maximize the strength of the person. And then I give the strength assessment and the hiring process, not after they're hired.
Yeah.
Okay, and when they are on board and the onboarding, the manager already knows how to design the job and match the job around what the person is at best, and not hiring the person based on skill and resume and a couple of references and then trying to peg the person into a job. That's preventable. The work has to be done before we get there, and the manager has to get there with the attitude of, I know what this person is good and great at, and we are going to match the job to the best of this person. That's the ideal. It's not crazy, it's doable.
That's great.
Just you need to ask the right questions. What satisfies your work? What fulfills your work? What would be worthy to come work? What have you seen in this company that attracts you as a changer in the world? Okay, those questions has to be part of the hiring process.
As a final thought, Alfredo, what's one mindset shift you want every listener to walk away with,
From fixing to
especially those who are
nourishing.
leading through?
From fixing to nourishing. From fixing to nourishing. Okay. Give people the incentive, the courage to be the best of who they are. Don't try to make them through some image that you made in your mind. Okay, work around the best of who people are and not the other way around. And by the way, I gave you this 3777 for positive. I also have my calendar there, and I give 30 minutes discovery session for those who go deeper, which I do it with pleasure. I have limited amount of time, clearly. My calendar, I keep hours for working with clients, but I have certain hours that I like to explore with people, potential partnerships and growth. But fixing to growing, from fixing to nourishing. Okay, that's the big paradigm that we had to go through, Enoch.
Huge thank you to Alfredo for giving us your incredible insight, but also for giving us your time. If listeners want to find more of your work, where can they find you, Alfredo?
Yes, I'm going to go back to positives 37777 because there you have my calendar, okay, and you can make an appointment with me, which is no strings attached, just to get to know each other, okay, and you can find your strengths.
That's great. Yeah, thank you so much.
Pleasure, really. Thank you. Very good questions, by the way, that
Yeah,
made me think.
that's good.
Okay, and bring the best out of me. You actually were not fixing; you were nourishing.
That's
I
good
want
to
to
hear.
thank you for that.
Yeah, I know that's good to hear.